In this video, we're going to take a look at completing the square, which is another method to solve quadratic equations. Completing the square is probably not one of the most useful ways to solve quadratic equations because it can get pretty messy, but it's a very important method for dealing with other types of functions as well. So we start off with dealing with it with some simple quadratic equations, then you're going to move into functions, and then you're going to move on to other things. So what we're working on right now is kind of a foundational method. So completing the square, the ones that we're going to look at are going to be in the form where you've got a number out front, and we've got a number out front, and we've got an even number in the middle. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this into the form of something squared. That's why it's called completing the square. So if you remember back, let me come over here. This is a little review from when we did multiplying out squares. So when we look at something squared, we have to FOIL it out. So let's take, for example, x plus 1 squared. When we FOIL that out, we'd get x squared plus x would be 2x, and then plus 1. So I'm putting the O and the I together as we go just to save space. Or you can remember there was a formula where you double the middle and square on the end. You could also use the formula as well. Let's say we've got x plus 2 squared. So you would do x plus 2 times x plus 2. You're going to get x squared at the front, plus 2x gives us 4x, so double in the middle, and then 2 times 4, or 2 times 2 would be 4 on the end. All right, a little bit hard to see the pattern from those two, but now we're going to start seeing a pattern emerge. So when we do x plus 3 times x plus 3, we're going to get x squared plus 3x, and 3x would be 6x. Plus 3 times 3 is 9. So if you look, the middle term always comes from adding these together, and since the two factors match, the middle ones are always going to match. So you always get double in the middle. 3x and 3x is 6x, 2x and 2x is 4x, 1x and 1x is 2x. So you always get double in the middle. And then the last one comes from the last part of the FOIL, which is going to be 3 times 3 is 9, 2 times 2 is 4, 1 times 1 is 1. So the middle number is always double, and the last one is always square. So let's look at x plus 4 to see if we can finish this pattern. So we get x squared plus 4x, and 4x would be 8x, plus 4 times 4 would be 16. So look, again, we get double in the middle and square on the end. And if there's a negative in here, the only thing that changes is one of the signs. It still follows the same pattern. So let's say we've got x minus 5. We're going to get x squared. We're going to get minus 5x minus 5x is minus 10x. Look at that. It's still double in the middle. And then negative 5 times negative 5 is plus 25 on the end. So it's still double in the middle and squared on the end. So the sign doesn't change that at all. All right, so that's looking at what it looks like when we square things out. So now if we want to do the reverse, if we want to get this into the form of something squared, we've always got to have double in the middle and square on the end. Double in the middle, square on the end, double in the middle, square on the end, and so on. So if you want to get from the middle term to the last term, you're going to have to, so let's say we know this number, divide by 2 and square it. Divide by 2, you get 1 squared is 1. Divide by 2 and square it. Divide by 2 is 2, squared is 4. Divide by 2 and square it. Divide by 2, you get 3. 3 squared is 9. Divide by 2 and square it. Divide by 2, you get 4. Squared is 16. And then finally divide by 2 and square it. When you divide by 2, you're getting this number out here, and then you're squaring it to get the last number there. Okay, so completing the square is using that format to try to get this into the form that I want. So coming back to the problem that we have, x squared plus 4x plus 1, the first thing you should always look for are common factors and easy binomial factors. We don't have any common factors. I can't factor 1, that's going to add up to 4, so I can't do the reverse of FOIL. So we're going to do completing the square. We've got a 1 out front, we've got an even number in the middle, so this should be pretty straightforward. So for this method, I'm going to move this 1 over here and get it out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And then what I want to do is I want to take the middle number, divide by 2, and square it. So divide by 2, I get 4, squared, I get 4. I need a 4 here to be in the right form. I'm trying to get it into one of the forms that's over here. So divide by 2 and square it, I get 4. And then I can't just throw a 4 into the middle of an equation. I've got to balance it out, so I add 4 over here as well. Whatever we do to the left, we've got to do to the right as well. All right, so we've got x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals -1 plus 4. Sorry, my handwriting got a little messy there. So on the left, this should be in the form of something squared, and it is. X plus 2 squared, double in the middle, square on the end. Or you can think of factors of 4 that would add up to 4 would be 2 and 2. And then you'd write it as x plus 2 squared. And on the right-hand side, we've got -1 plus 4 is 3. Okay, now why would we want to do that? Well, it was something that didn't factor in the original, but now we have something that we can deal with. We've got something squared is equal to a number. Something squared is equal to a number. We know what to do with that. We can do the square root method. So I can take a square root on the left, square root on the right. Don't forget the plus or minus. On the left side, it cancels. And on the right side, we've got plus or minus the square root of 3. So now I can solve by x by doing -2, and I get -2 plus or minus the square root of 3, and I have my solution. So I was able to get a solution for a problem that didn't factor by using completing the square. All right, let's try another one. Let's say that we've got x squared plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, so again, the first thing we look for is common factors. We don't have any common factors. We look to see if we can factor this as a trinomial, factors of 4, that would give us 6. That's not going to work either. Okay, so now we're looking at completing the square. We've got a 1 out front, we've got an even number in the middle, so this should be pretty easy to do. Again, I really just want the x terms, so for this one method, I'm going to move the 4 over to the other side. All of the other methods, we want everything on one side. This one's a little bit different. Okay, so now I have x squared plus 6x. I want to get this in the right form, so I'm going to take the middle number, I'm going to divide by 2 and square it. That's what gets me into the right form. Divide by 2 and square it. Divide by 2 is 3. Squared, 3 squared, is going to be 9. I need a 9 right there to get us in the right form. If I add 9 to the left, I need to add 9 to the right to balance it out. And now we should be able to factor. So this factors as x plus 3 squared, okay, double in the middle, square on the end, or you can think of factors of 9 that would add up to 6 would be 3 and 3. And on the right-hand side, -4 and +9 would be +5. Now again, I've got something squared is equal to a number. I can take the square root. Cancels on the left, and I get plus or minus the square root of 5 on the right. I can't reduce that. So I just solve for x. So I do the opposite, and I get -3 plus or minus the square root of 5. Okay, and that's my final answer. All right, now at least in one version, that's the basics for completing the square. At least in one version of the book that's being used for this, they're not giving it to you as an equation, they're just giving it to you as an expression, and they want you to complete the square. So let me show you how to do that as an expression. And there's a couple different ways that you can tackle this. But if you don't have an equation, this is kind of similar to what you're going to do in college algebra in terms of working with a function. So let's say that we've got, let's do a new one. Let's say we've got x squared plus 4x plus 7. Okay, this is an expression, this is not an equation. So I can't move anything to the other side, I can't add to the other side because there is no other side. So I have to work with this one a little bit differently. Again, what I really want to focus on is I want to focus on the x terms because I want to get this into the right format. I don't have anywhere to move this 7, so I'm just going to kind of push it off to the side, but it's still with us. I can't get rid of it. Okay, I'm just moving it over to the side a little bit. The completing the square part works the same. I'm going to divide by 2 and square it. Divide by 2, I get 2. Square it, I get 4. Now the balancing part here is a little bit different because there is no other side of the equation. Equation rules say whatever you add to the left, you add to the right to keep it balanced, like a scale. But this one, there is no other side. It's just an expression. And I can't just add 4 to it. That changes the value. So to balance this out, since it's inside of an expression, I'm going to do minus 4 right here to balance it out. So if I want to add 4 here, I'm going to do minus 4 right here. And if I were to simplify this, I'd be back to where I started. I haven't changed anything. I did plus 4, I did minus 4, and that's the same as what I started with. All right, but we want it in this form because this is something squared. So this factors as x plus 2 squared. And then over here on the right-hand side, I've got plus 7 minus 4 would be plus 3. Okay, so again, factoring as an expression is the same idea as far as the divide by 2 and square it. You just have to balance it a little bit differently. And this is what they're looking for in the homework. So let's try one more of those. Okay, let's say we've got x squared plus 2x plus 10. Okay, x squared plus 2x plus 10, and we're trying to get it into this form of something squared plus a number. So again, I want to focus on the x's. I'm just going to move that 10 off to the side a little bit. I can't get rid of it. I can't move it to the other side. There is no other side. I'm just making a little space here. All right, divide by 2 and square it. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So I need to add 1 right here. Notice that you're always going to add 1 in this step because it's squared. So whenever you do to the divide by 2 and square it, it's always going to be adding. All right, so I want to add 1 right here to get it in the right form, but I can't just throw 1 into the middle of an expression, so I balance that out by doing a minus 1 over here. If I add 1 here, I do minus 1 here. Now we should be in the right form. This is going to factor as x plus 1 squared. Factors of 1 that would give us 2 would be 1 and 1, where you can do half of this number square root of that number. And then over here we've got plus 9 on the outside. Okay, so that's looking at completing the square as an equation and as an expression.